For once, Team Avatar is traveling through a forest by foot, because Sokka pointed out that the reason why Zuko keeps finding them is that Appa is so easy to spot. Unfortunately, they stumble into a camp of Fire Nation soldiers, but before either side has fully processed the situation, a troop of fighters descends from the treetops. They swiftly overwhelm the Fire Nation soldiers and clear out the camp without much trouble. After the fight, the troop's leader introduces himself to Team Avatar as Jet and his group as the Freedom Fighters. Jet has two cards: Jet Freedom Fighter and Jet Rebel Leader. Jet Freedom Fighter is a red and white 5-mana 3/1 that, when he enters, deals damage equal to the number of creatures we control to target creature an opponent controls. This symbolizes Jet's reliance on his group, but also that he's rather violent. Jet fights at the front lines. His second ability is, when Jet dies, get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. This symbolizes something else. We'll talk about it later. Jet Rebel Leader is a white 4-mana 3/4 that, when he attacks, lets us look at the top 5 cards of our library, then put a creature with mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. This Jet recruits new allies as he attacks. He is quite the smooth talker, but then he immediately sends them to the front lines, perpetuating his violence. On top of Jet, we have a whole bunch of cards depicting the Freedom Fighters. Jet is the charismatic and competent leader of a rebel troop that's been fighting back against the Fire Nation's occupation of the nearby Earth Kingdom village. He takes Team Avatar to the Freedom Fighters' hideout, which is hidden in the trees. The gang has a range of reactions to Jet. Aang and Katara are charmed by his strong rhetoric and charisma, with Katara being absolutely smitten. But Sokka is much more skeptical. He feels like something is off, but he can't quite figure out what that is. It's hard to tell if there's actually something sinister going on, or if Sokka is just being a contrarian. Either way, he wants to leave quickly, but Jet, being the smooth talker he is, tells Sokka that he relied on him, and that he really needs him on an important mission tomorrow. Sokka cares about feeling important and buys into this. The next morning, Sokka, Jet, and a bunch of our freedom fighters are lying in ambush. Sokka expects a Fire Nation soldier to be the target, but all who appears is an old man. Fire Nation, yes, but a civilian. This doesn't stop Jet, and he and his troop descend on the old man, beating and robbing him. Sokka tries to stop this from happening, arguing that this is just a civilian, but Jet doesn't see the difference. To him, all Fire Nation is the same, and it all needs to be eradicated. In this moment, Sokka learns that Jet is an extremist, and a dangerous one at that. That evening, he tries to tell Aang and Katara, but Jet lies to them about the situation, and they believe his words over Sokka's. Later that night, Sokka spots Jet and his confidants sneaking out of camp. He follows them, sees how they bring barrels of blasting jelly with them, and overhears their plan. They want to fill the nearby reservoir with water, and then blow up the dam, creating a massive flood that will crash into the occupied village, wiping out all within. The Duke briefly argues that they probably shouldn't do this. The civilian casualties would be too high. But Jet simply replies that getting rid of the Fire Nation is worth any sacrifice. Then they spot Sokka and capture him. The next morning, Jet leads Aang and Katara to the nearby river and asks them to bend the groundwater onto the surface to fill up the reservoir. They ask where Sokka is, but Jet simply lies. Then he leads them to their task. During this, Sokka has managed to free himself. Aang and Katara finish filling the reservoir quicker than they thought, and so they go looking for Jet. While doing so, they see a group of freedom fighters loading barrels of blasting jelly in front of the dam. They instantly realize what's going on, but as they try to intercept this act of terrorism, Jet appears again and starts fighting them. He can't win the 1 versus 2, but he doesn't need to. Jet is just trying to stall. It doesn't take long until he hears a signal, which he responds to in kind, and then we see Longshot fire a burning arrow at the dam. The barrels explode, the dam bursts, and huge waves of water flood the river, quickly heading towards the village, destroying it. We see this on Price of Freedom, one of the strongest card names in the set. Price of Freedom is a red 2-mana sorcery that destroys target land or artifact an opponent controls. They then get to search their library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. We also draw a card. Lands have very specific meaning within Magic. They represent the land itself, but not just the land, but also the ocean, the sky, and cities. Often, more complex lands will also display more complex societies. For example, both Shock and Surveillance depict specific structures. So do the Capenna Triomes or the Bondland cycle. This isn't a hard rule, just an observable pattern. If we think about how Price of Freedom is played, then it's very likely to be cast on a non-basic land, which then gets replaced with a basic. A sacred foundry replaced by a plains, a commercial district by a forest. Society destroyed, forcibly returned to nature. One of the best cards in the set. Katara is sickened by Jet's actions, screaming at him. Jet just continues his routine, claiming that now the valley has been freed. Then Sokka arrives on the back of Appa. He tells them that he managed to save the villagers by warning them of the attack. They didn't believe him at first, but then the old man from the day prior vouched for him, and they managed to evacuate everybody. Jet calls Sokka a traitor and a fool, telling him that this was their only chance to get freedom from the Fire Nation. Sokka replies that Jet is the traitor and asks, who would have been alive to enjoy that freedom? Katara and Aang join Sokka on Appa, apologize for not believing him, and then Team Avatar flies off, leaving Jet behind.